Act 3. The room was colder than normal and darker, maybe on purpose. Mario seemed confused, but was he playing it off?
Senor, I tell the truth.
Well, that's not what the polygraph said, and it's rarely wrong.
I don't know, senor.
Alright, let's see where the mix-up might have been, Walter said as he opened a yellow folder. Okay, so you were asked, do you or have you ever felt the urge to kill or cause your son great bodily damage? You answered no. That was a lie.
But...
Excuse me, Mr. Alvarez. You were also asked if you felt that way in the last month, and you answered no to that too. Can you tell me why you wanted to kill your son?
Senor, I never want to kill him. I was mad about why he lied, but I never want to hurt him.
Let's backtrack a bit. Walk me through your exact movements that day.
I get to San Diego at 11. I go to...
What time did you get the hotel?
I think it was 6.
This correlated with the hotel footage of him checking in. What time did you leave to go back to Hillcrest?
I think it was 8 or 9.
And did you do anything before you went back? Go anywhere?
No, I don't think so.
You just took a nap?
Si.
Because you were tired.
Si.
Neji looked at him, cocking his head to the side. You didn't eat anything? Drink anything? Mario shook his head. Then why do we have you on camera walking to the liquor store nearby purchasing a bottle of tequila? Mario shrugged.
I don't know, senor. I might have went out.
Oh, no, it's no, Mike. You did that, Mr. Alvarez. It's on camera. You know what else is on camera? You stumbling to your truck 4 hours later to drive back to Hillcrest. That's not 8 or 9. That means you left at 10. In Walter's phone interview with Daniela, she had mentioned that the main reason for the divorce was due to Mario's drinking.
I don't know, senor.
You better tell me the truth.
I had a few drinks because I was angry. I drink when I'm angry.
Nagy smirked before flipping to another page in his folder and looking back up. Can you tell me why you were here? He asked, sliding a photo over to Mario. It was a still shot taken from a camera located at the top of a building. The photo showed Mario Sr. walking in a parking lot, and the time showed 3:02 a.m. on the morning of the murder. The Ralph's grocery store was located across the street from Rich's. Mario looked at the picture and shook his head.
I don't know where that is, senor.
You don't know where that is? Look at the time. What time does it say?
3:02.
3:02 what?
3:02 a.m.
3:02 a.m. Mr. Alvarez, care to explain to me why you were a block away from where your son was killed, minutes before he was killed when you told me that you left much earlier?
I just guess. I wasn't paying attention.
You know you tend to pay a lot more attention when you're sober. Mario looked down. So we've got you on camera, seemingly drunk, in the area of your son's murder, at the time of your son's murder, when you lied about it. And remember, this is all after threatening him. Where'd you park when you got to Hillcrest at 10?
I don't remember. I think it was the street.
You don't remember? I didn't expect you to. Those same cameras caught you walking at Ralph's, caught you parking there as well. Why'd you leave your phone in the car? Records show the phone's last location was in Mario's truck the entire time he was in Hillcrest, from 10 p.m. to midnight when it died, except cameras see him traveling on foot through all the surrounding areas, including North Park until after 3 when he returned.
I didn't it. It was late. Mario blocked me, so I left it. I didn't think I would be gone for long.
Gone doing what? What were you doing? I mean, you say you were looking for your son, but I find it hard to believe that you were walking around for 5 hours just looking for your son. I mean, you weren't even in Hillcrest the whole time. We see you in North Park, Balboa, on Adams. Man, you were everywhere. Were you out exploring or something?
No, senor. When I was looking, I got lost and had to find my way back.
How did you find your way back? You aren't from the area and you didn't have your phone.
I asked people.
Ask who? I don't imagine a lot of people were out at around 3 a.m.
There were a few that help.
Walter looked at him for a moment before saying, You still shouldn't have been drinking and driving. I could take you in on that alone.
See, I know. Very bad, but I didn't kill Mario.
We weren't talking about that. I'm talking about drinking and driving. You could have killed someone on the way there or on the way back that wasn't your son. And if you were that drunk, maybe you don't remember killing your son. You didn't even remember where you parked.
No, I remember. I did not kill my son.
Nagy looked to the ceiling and inhaled before saying, "We'll see. For now, I'm going to hold you, though, until we get to the bottom of this."
Senor.
Mario squinted his eyes. "Yeah," he continued as he stood and Officer Davis entered. "I'm not charging you yet, but please stand, turn around, and put your hands behind your back." Mario argued, but didn't put up too much of a fight as Officer Davis escorted him out into holding. Walter knew he couldn't keep him too long without charging him, so he had to figure this case out fast. Later that day, Bryan came in to speak with Walter about some interesting things the detective found.
"So what's up, man? Any leads?"
Bryan asked as he entered. "Take a seat. This shouldn't take long,"
"All right,"
he said before sitting. "So I called you in because of some footage on your ring cam. Also, witnesses say that after Mario's fight with Skylar, you and he got into an argument. By he, I mean your boyfriend. Can you tell me about that? You told me you argued, I'll give you that, but I checked the footage inside and apparently you two had to be separated before you left him there and went back home. So that means it was a little more serious than you let on." Bryan's eyes filled with tears.
"Yes, we argued. I was upset that he was still getting into fights with his exes. I told him I wasn't having any more fun, but he didn't want to and called me a bitch. I get he was drunk, but yeah. Mario wanted to stay out and party, so I went home alone."
Walter placed a folder on the table and opened it, revealing his computer and text history. "So we discovered data showing that Mario was cheating on you, and that was part of the reason you were arguing. You neglected to mention that. Who was he cheating with?" Bryan looked down, but the detective already knew the answer.
"Skylar."
"So your boyfriend was cheating on you with the same guy he was with when he was cheating with you? And you didn't think that was important to mention?"
"I don't know. I guess I wasn't really thinking about anything. Jesus, I'm still in mourning."
"Okay, then can you explain why 2 weeks before Pride, around the same time you found out he was cheating with Skylar, you Googled how to get away with murder?" Bryan's face drained of color and he looked down at his hands.
"I was looking for the show, not actually how to."
"Then why'd you keep searching related subjects? You said it. You work in law. You should be smarter than that. You looked up what's the best way to kill someone discreetly before going on to search the deadliest poisons to humans. I mean, you did it with a VPN, so you tried to hide it, but you know we always find these things, Mr. Kalemi."
"I don't know. I think I was drinking and got interested in the subject. Just got distracted like one of those wormhole online things. It was nothing malicious. Did I order any poison?"
"No, it doesn't show you did yet, but it's a hell of a coincidence that you searched that a couple of weeks before his murder. You get why this looks suspicious, right?"
"I don't know. You gotta believe me. I didn't kill him, man. I loved him despite everything. Despite all the bullshit, I would never hurt him."
"You said you went out looking for him after 3. We know that you were near the alley around the time he was killed. Where exactly did you look?"
Not sure. We live on 4th and Brooks, so I just took 4th all the way to University and walked up and down that, hoping I'd see him. Most of the bars and clubs were closed, and the few that were open wouldn't let me in to look."
"Did you happen to look in that alley?"
"No, just mainly stayed on University."
"And how long did you stay out?"
"I think it was only like 30 minutes or something."
"You said an hour last time."
It might have been. I'm not sure."
"Want to know something?" Bryan studied his eyes. "It was neither. Thanks to your ring cam, we know you were out an hour and 15 minutes. Bryan drew back.
"I didn't think I was gone that long."
"What were you doing during that time?"
"I told you. I was looking for Mario."
"You're shown to have stopped movements multiple times. At one point around 3:45, you were seen going into the Urban Mo's parking lot. Mr. Kalemi, you were in that lot for 10 minutes. What were you doing?" Bryan looked down. "Tell me the truth."
I had to, relieve myself, and I didn't have toilet paper."
"You couldn't make it home, Mr. Kalemi?"
"No, I'm sorry. Believe me, I thought of that. It just came on so suddenly. Must have been the burrito I had earlier."
"Mr. Kalemi, so you mean to tell me that you were taking a shit?" He nodded. "Where did you put it?" How did you wipe? Kalemi looked down and away.
Behind the dumpster. I used my shirt and then threw it in.
That's why your ring cam caught you coming back into your home shirtless, Kalemi nodded. It was too late for Walter to check. The dumpsters had long been empty, but the fact he left with a shirt and came back shirtless was a huge red flag. Nagy wanted to hold him, but didn't yet have anything that would stick.
Right,
He said, looking down. Something doesn't sound right, something off.
Detective, I know it sounds crazy, but it's the truth.
Walter looked at Bryan for what seemed an eternity, but eventually let him go, at least for the time being. After Kalemi left, Skylar was brought in for his secondary interview. He even looked more nervous than Bryan had before as he took a seat. Hey buddy, sorry to bring you in. I know that you were busy. Turns out we got that warrant you asked for.
Fuck you and this bullshit case. What the fuck do you want?
Well, firstly, glad you could come back in. Skylar sneered and sat in defiance as Walter stared into his eyes. Why didn't you mention that you were still sleeping with the victim at the time of his death? Skylar's eyes widened. I mean, you made it seem like you guys were completely done.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Maybe this refreshes your memory, Nagy said, pushing forward a stack of papers.
What the fuck is that?
Take a look, he continued, pushing the papers closer to Skylar. It was the digital proof that Skylar had indeed been seeing Mario again.
That doesn't prove anything.
It proves you were lying. Now, were you just lying then, or are you a liar?
So what? We fucked around when he was with Bryan? Who cares? I had him first.
Let me ask you this. Why did you send those images and videos to Mario's dad?
I don't know, dude. I was fucking pissed. We had just fucked, and he said that he wasn't leaving Bryan to get back with me, so I lost it. I think I was drunk. Anyway, I knew he hadn't came out to his dad yet, so... joke's on you, bitch.
And do you really think that was appropriate?
Who gives a fuck? I was mad. What does that shit have to do with Mario dying?
Let's say you didn't do it, and someone else did. If your actions influenced the crime, you could be found just as guilty.
Wait, are you saying you think his dad killed him? He lives all the way in Riverside or something.
Not focusing on anyone but you right now. Well, to tell you the truth, your phone didn't tell us anything we didn't already know, but I've got to ask you again, just to make sure I've got it right. You did say that you got a Gatorade when you left the house party, right?
Yeah?
Okay, just a Gatorade and nothing else?
Is this the Twilight Zone, dude? I've already told you twice.
Okay, then why do we have footage of you purchasing a nicotine vape pen? Skylar canted his head to the left.
Oh shit, I forgot about that.
Convenient. Do you remember what it looked like?
Do I remember what it looked like? Fuck no. I think there was just one left, and my other ran out.
Where is it located now?
The vape? Dude, I don't fucking know. I threw that away days ago.
Skylar, what if I told you that the same type of vape you bought, the small blue one, was found at the crime scene? Skylar shrugged as Nagy continued. And what if I told you that besides that liquor store, the next nearest place to get a vape like that is at least 5 miles away? Skylar squinted. Now we're currently testing for DNA and prints. So Skylar, is there anything that you want to tell me before I get the results? Skylar's eyes searched the floor before veering back to Walter.
No, a lot of people vape.
Right, but you knew the victim, was in the area, and lied about having an item found at the crime scene.
I didn't lie about anything. Like I said, I just forgot.
Again, forgot. Okay. Skylar, based on the evidence we have, I'm going to have to put you on a 48-hour hold while we continue our investigation. Skylar jumped out of his seat, causing Nagy to draw back and Officer Davis to appear.
You can't do that. I didn't do shit wrong, fucking piece of shit.
Walter signaled to Officer Davis, who stepped forward to escort Skylar out. Skylar continued to protest, his voice growing louder as he was led away. One more, Nagy thought as he got a cup of coffee later that day. It was nearing nightfall as he thought about his next 2 interviews. Zach would be there in an hour to be questioned about some interesting information he withheld after Walter had gotten the warrant for his phone. Omar was set to come back in the morning. Zach got there a little earlier than expected, which pleased Nagy. Mr. Gobert, thank you for coming in.
Sure thing.
So trust me, Zach, I know it's getting repetitive, but walk me through that day again, from before you left to when you got home. And remember, be honest.
Okay, started drinking, got bored, wanted to go out and, just be around people. Hillcrest is always a good time and vibe. All my nice clothes were still at my house, so my brother let me use his. You saw he's a lot smaller. That's why I had that tight-ass shirt on, but bearable. Had to take an Uber because I was drinking.
Zach continued until the end, not deviating from his story. Is there anything you didn't tell us about your relationship with the victim, Mario?
No, not that I can think of.
Really? Because we've uncovered some new evidence that contradicts what you told me earlier. Zach sat down, his eyes narrowing.
I'm not sure what you mean.
Well, for one, we got all those texts you tried to delete between you and Mario. Also, you told me you were at the alibi. You left quite often. What were you doing?
Just going outside to smoke.
This is pretty close to the murder, and I see you Ubered there, but you didn't Uber back. How did you get back?
I think I caught a ride with someone.
You think or you know?
I know. Sorry.
No, it's fine, but you left with a random stranger?
I mean, I'm a pretty big guy. Besides, they were going my way, and I didn't want to spend any on Uber.
Who was it? Was it someone at the bar?
No, just some guy that I met when I was outside smoking.
Where did you two go after you left?
Just back home.
To your place or his?
His place?
T answered, shocked by the question. What were you doing? The towers pinged you near an apartment complex for half an hour before he took you back home.
Just hanging out and drinking.
Zach looked down. Interesting. So tell me why you left the alibi at 2 a.m. but apparently didn't leave Hillcrest with the man who we found and spoke to until 3:18 to 3:20? That's over an hour of not knowing exactly where you are. What were you doing because Gary, assuming you remember his name, says that he didn't meet you until 3:30? That was before you two had your fun and he dropped you back off to your brother's at 4:30. So Zach, get honest with me. I already know you and Gary had sex. He told me that. That's not what you're here for. What I need to know most of all is what you were doing from the time you left the alibi at 2 and met Gary at 3:30. Can you tell me that?
Just hanging out, I guess. I got a lot of shit on my mind. You know, walking around, taking in the atmosphere. I'm not gay. I just get a little too drunk from time to time.
There's more, Zach. We recovered some deleted text messages from your phone. Walter flipped to another page in the file, showing printed screenshots of text messages. You recognize any of these? He asked as Zach looked, his eyes widening. He was speechless. These messages show you were having sex with the victim as well. It started after you hired him and ended because you felt you were being overcharged, especially by someone you were sleeping with. This was around the time you began posting those bad reviews. Zach's face turned red as he clenched his fists.
I didn't think it was important. And honestly, I was embarrassed by it.
When Lisa hired Mario, you began texting him again out of anger. You can see that you even said that you put his scrawny ass in the hospital.
Look, man, I was mad. He was representing my wife in our divorce. It felt like he was using everything he knew against me. And what if he told her? Dude, I'm just like, what?
When was the last time you spoke to him?
After he blocked me.
Well, you say you were just hanging out, but I need a location. It shows you were still in the area.
On University. I know. I went to Lestat's to charge my phone for a sec.
It was open?
Right. It's 24 hours.
Oh, that's right. I'll look into it. Okay, you're good to go, but answer your phone. Zach nodded and began to leave. Oh, and Mr. Gobert. Zach turned around.
Yeah?
Please be honest. With me and yourself. Zach nodded again, bowed his head, and left. The next morning was bright and sunny. Omar tried to blow him off, so Walter decided to visit him at his job in person that morning. Omar, we need to go over some new information we've uncovered.
Okay, what you got?
Thanks for making the time for me. So the first thing is you weren't where you said you were. Cameras at Rich's show you were there at the same time as Mario. Why didn't you mention this?
I swear I thought the place was called Gossip Grill.
Well, you did try to get into Gossip Grill, but they turned you away because they were at capacity. But no, you were at Rich's. Do you remember seeing him?
Who, Mario? No.
Really? Are you sure, Mr. Castillo?
Sure I might have seen him, but I can't really recall.
Maybe these can help jog your memory. Walter pushed photos showing Omar, who was smoking, was feet away from Mario. Both he and Mario were aware of each other's presences, but never spoke to the other. Lastly, cameras see Omar leave the club minutes after Mario and head in the same direction. Did you say anything to him?
I tried to avoid him. We didn't have any contact. I didn't want any trouble.
So why'd you leave right after him? Literally right before he was murdered.
I just decided to leave and go home. I had done enough people watching and my wife and kids were out of town, so I was on my own. Maybe catch up on some sleep.
Walter raised his eyebrows. You conveniently forgot to mention that you saw the victim before he died. You said you tried to avoid him, but you were both at the same place at the same time and you left around the same time. Don't you find that interesting? I mean, you, as a lawyer, must...
No, Detective Nagy. I didn't have anything to do with Mario's death. I was just trying to have a night out in a positive environment.
Still doesn't look good. Mind if we search your home?
Yes, Detective, I do mind. And I think at this time it's best to tell you, if you're going to charge me with something, please do. And I'd like to speak to my lawyer. If not, then I think we're done here.
Omar stood up and walked outside of his office, gesturing for Nagy to follow. Hey, Nagy called, stopping him in the main office. If you had anything to do with this, I will find out. You've already lied to me.
I didn't lie. I forgot. And again, either arrest me or leave, please.
After leaving, Walter thought that maybe he didn't look closely enough into Omar. He would make a point to do that later, but for now, Captain Cowler had indicated he wanted to speak with him. It seemed urgent. Nagy walked into Cowler's office, who was seated behind his desk.
Sit down, Walter.
He said, to which Walter complied.
Walter, your promotion is pending the outcome of this case. You've been a solid detective for years, and this case could be the key to moving you up. But right now, we have a bigger problem. The district attorney's office is breathing down my neck. This case has become national news, and there's a lot of pressure to make an arrest. The DA wants someone charged immediately, and they don't care who as long as the evidence is there.
I'm doing my best, Captain.
I understand, but here's the thing. Your best needs to get on turbo mode. You have 24 hours to charge someone. The DA needs to show that we're on top of this. If we don't, heads will roll, and your promotion could be off the table. Walter, I know this isn't easy, but you have to make a choice. We can't sit on it any longer.
I understand. I'll get it done.
I'm sure you will.
When Walter left, he returned to his office to go over the suspects. His mind was racked. Everyone seemed guilty. Bryan, on one hand, was the closest to him, but on the other, Mario's father didn't drive 2 hours for nothing. Skylar seemed so volatile he would attack his own mother, whereas Omar lied to his face. But so did most of the others, including Zach, who certainly lied about being bi while Billy actually confessed. And then there was Everett, whose bad habits may have caught up with him. Walter couldn't get Mario's face, covered in blood and mud, out of his mind. After he was done, he checked his phone and saw multiple missed calls from Koresha. Just then he realized he had forgotten about Keisha's dance recital. When he got home an hour later, the house was dark except for the faint glow of a lamp in the living room. He knew Koresha was waiting for him, and he dreaded the incoming confrontation. Walter pushed open the front door quietly, hoping to avoid waking Keisha. The creak of the door seemed louder than normal as Koresha's figure emerged from the shadows of the living room.
I can't believe you forgot it.
Walter sighed. I know, I'm sorry, honey. The case...
That mother... case should not be your top priority, Walter. She was looking for you. Do you have any idea how much that hurt her?
Koresha, I'm sorry. I totally lost track of time. The captain sped this thing up and says he needs it solved by tomorrow. Promise after that we'll take a vacation. I'll make it up to you. Promise.
It's not just me you need to make it up to. Your job is taking over our lives. We hardly see you anymore. When was the last time we had a family dinner? Or went out together? Promises, Walter? That's all they are. Promises. I need you here. Keisha needs you here. Not your promises.
I know, just one more day, baby. Koresha took a deep breath, then walked toward the bedroom.
I'm going to bed. Think about what you really want. This better be the last time. Oh, and you owe your daughter an apology.
The door closed behind her, leaving Walter alone, and he sank onto the couch, burying his face in his hands. The next day, just as Walter was ready to charge someone, Officer Davis let him know that a couple just came in and wanted to come forward. They are the same couple that found Mario's body that morning. About 30 minutes later, Walter arrived at an upscale apartment complex. Thanks for talking to me. Nice place you guys got. Oh, and nice to meet you. The taller of the two, Rick, nodded and shook Walter's hand before Tyler did. Please, have a seat. So what's on your mind? Rick began.
We had just left a house party on 10th, and we're headed home. We live right by the bridge, so we usually walk. The breeze is nice. And Tyler was in front of me on Instagram, again.
His boyfriend rolled his eyes, but Rick continued.
So, anyway, I'm looking down at my phone, texting a friend, and I see he's a little further past me than I thought. Keep in mind, this all kind of happened quickly.
Walter nodded.
So yeah, I see he's ahead of me, still on the phone. That's when I noticed something. It was two guys fighting in the alley. One looked like he had tattoos on his face, but that's all I could make out.
Walter thought of Wilson as Rick went on.
My boyfriend doesn't notice, of course, so I yell for him to stop, and he gets totally freaked out, turns around and starts running toward me. So we get out of there and go the opposite way, and back toward 10th and around. The detour was only a block further than we would have traveled, so we weren't upset.
Why didn't you call the police?
I mean, at the time, it just seemed like a fight, and nothing like too crazy. And I was in a rush because I needed to get some sleep. I had to work in the morning.
Okay, please continue.
So we get home and shower.
When I got out is when I realized I lost my phone.
Tyler said.
That had never happened before, but I had drank a lot more than normal. I mean, it was pride, and you only live once.
Tyler gave an awkward smile before continuing.
So I go over in my mind when the last time I used it was, and I really can't remember.
That's when I tell him that I knew for sure I saw him with it before the fight.
Rick added.
I don't know. I think I was just so freaked out, I dropped it and didn't think about it again until before I went to sleep. Luckily, Rick went back out with me to find it.
Right, so we backtrack our steps and get back to the alley. Right away, I found his phone. I mean, it was pretty easy.
Yeah, it has a bright yellow case.
Tyler said, holding his phone up.
Matched my outfit.
See, this was us that night.
Rick said, showing the detective an image of the two on Pride Night. Rick had a blue tank top and red Speedo, while Tyler donned a yellow t-shirt, had dyed blonde hair at the time, and tattered blue jeans.
Took that picture, literally, right before it happened.
Walter noted confirmation of the house at the party they said they came from because it was in the background. Rick continued.
But anyway, he notices someone laying down. So we go over and ask if he's okay. Of course, he doesn't respond. We shake him and yell. He still doesn't respond.
So I call the police. My phone was still on, and I was nervous at first because it had been raining on and off. But when I found it, it was fine.
Why did you wait until 6 to call?
We didn't.
Rick said.
They didn't arrive until 6. We waited almost 2 hours.
Yeah, it was a busy night, I heard. Is that all? The couple said that was it, and Walter thanked them for their help, telling them he was grateful. After he left, Walter knew he was out of time and had to make a decision. Assistant Detective, you have reached the end. Now it is time to accuse a suspect. To see if you are right, go to the time in this video for that suspect. The times for each suspect accused is listed in the description of this video. If you are wrong, no worries. Go back over the evidence and choose another suspect for Detective Nagy to charge. The accusals. The accusal of Mario Sr. Nagy looked at Mario Sr., who had been called in a third time.
Senor, I cannot keep doing all of this driving.
Mr. Alvarez, we've gone over this multiple times. The texts, the threats, the polygraph, your trip to San Diego, none of it adds up in your favor. Mario's face paled.
I didn't kill him. You must believe me, I was angry, but I would never hurt my son.
Walter leaned forward, tapping the table lightly. You threatened to beat the gay out of him. You were angry because you felt lied to about his life, about who he was. You were in Hillcrest the night he died, stalking the streets, texting him relentlessly. He let the silence hang before adding, you were drunk, you confronted him, and now he's dead. You wanted him dead, didn't you? Mario opened his mouth, but no words came out. Mr. Alvarez, you're under arrest for the murder of your son, Mario Alvarez Jr. Walter motioned to Officer Davis standing outside, and they swiftly moved in to handcuff Mario. Months later, the courtroom was filled with tension as the jury read the verdict. Not guilty. Mario Alvarez Sr. sighed in relief as the room buzzed with whispers. He was acquitted. The defense had successfully dismantled the prosecution's case, pointing out the lack of physical evidence and the absence of eyewitnesses who placed him at the crime scene despite the polygraph test. Walter sat in the back of the courtroom, shoulders slumped, his stomach twisted. He had been sure that Mario had done it, but the case wasn't strong enough. How did this happen? The weeks following the trial seemed a blur. His promotion, which had seemed so close, was now out of reach. His failure to secure a conviction ruined his reputation. The media had turned on him, and whispers spread through the department about his handling of the case. His family life improved only because he had not been assigned to any new big cases. The case had gotten to him and destroyed his confidence, leading to depression. For all of these reasons, Walter, like Mario Sr., turned to the bottle. What started as a drink to take the edge off became a nightly ritual, and soon he was spiraling into alcoholism. He avoided his colleagues, stopped returning calls, and withdrew from the world, leading to Koresha to file for separation. The guilt over his inability to solve the case and the loss of his family gnawed at him, pushing him deeper into the abyss. Sitting in a dimly lit bar, nursing his drink, Walter stared blankly at the glass, the weight of his failure suffocating him. The promotion, his family, his reputation, it was all gone. And in the end, the truth about Mario's murder unsolved. The bitter boyfriend and his betrayal, Bryan is accused. Bryan walked in and shook Walter's hand.
All right, what's up, man? I'm starting to get nervous. I was just here yesterday.
Bryan said, smiling and taking a seat. Sorry about that, but thanks for coming back in. I've been going over your statements and the evidence we've gathered. There's just too many things pointing toward you.
I don't understand. I told you everything I know. I loved Mario.
That's not what the evidence says, and you were the closest one to him. You were near the alley at his time of death and disposed of your shirt after the murder. And I don't believe you just got caught in some sort of wormhole when you were on Google. That means it's premeditated. And I didn't realize it at first, but now I noticed. You're left-handed. The majority of wounds were found on the right side of his head. Means the attacker was probably left-handed. Oh, and the nature of the crime was especially personal.
That doesn't mean I killed him. I was upset. We had a fight, but I didn't...
You might as well admit to it, man. You're the most obvious choice, and we got enough evidence to charge you. The DA's is ready to move forward.
This is insane. I didn't do anything. Get my lawyer on the phone.
Walter had already signaled to Officer Davis outside, who entered before handcuffing him. Bryan Kalemi, you're under arrest for the murder of Mario Alvarez Jr. As the cuffs snapped around his wrists, Bryan stared at Walter in disbelief.
You're making a huge mistake. I can't believe this.
He continued before being carried out the room. Guess he was right to be nervous, Walter thought. Months later, Bryan's trial began. His law firm stood behind him, assembling a defense team that painted him as a hard-working, well-liked man who had no motive to kill Mario. They portrayed his internet search as a mere emotional outburst after a fight, not the precursor to a murder. There was even a witness that testified Kalemi smelled like excrement when they spoke during the time he was out. In the courtroom, Bryan sat stoically, his defense team skillfully dismantling the evidence Walter had relied on. The timeline was circumstantial. The killer didn't have to be left-handed. No one had seen Bryan in the alley, and there was no physical evidence tying him to the murder. When the judge delivered the verdict, the room was tense with anticipation. Not guilty. Bryan exhaled sharply, relief washing over him as his attorneys patted him on the back. Mario's mother let out a cry and his father sat stoically. The case had fallen apart in the courtroom and the judge had ruled there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. For Walter, Bryan's acquittal was devastating. Had he arrested the wrong man? He didn't believe so, but what could he do? The captain also informed Walter that he wouldn't get promoted and asked him to resign. Walter did so and began looking for a new job while the cracks in Walter's personal life grew wider and Koresha divorced him. After losing his job and his family, Walter packed up his things and left San Diego. Oakland was a fresh start, a city where his reputation didn't precede him. He managed to land a job as a detective in the Oakland Police Department, but it wasn't the same. The energy, the hope he once felt as a detective, it was gone. Sitting in his new, sparsely furnished apartment, Walter stared out at the city. He had lost everything and would die believing Bryan Kalemi was the murderer. Accusing Skylar. "How's jail treating you?" Nagy asked as he sat across from Skylar, who rested his head on his hands on the table.
Fuck you.
He responded, unwilling to look up. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Skylar. I came in to give you one last chance. To confess." Skylar slowly raised his head.
Dude, I'm not confessing to anything because I didn't do anything. Why are you doing this to me?
"You did it to yourself, Skylar. We couldn't get a DNA match or prints for that vape, but you were in the area during the murder and fought with Mario hours before, so there's your clear motive. Caught up in a lover's triangle, known to be angry, known to drink heavily, make poor decisions. My only question, Skylar, is why? Why couldn't you just let it go? I mean, I get it, Mario may have not been an angel, but beating him with a rock? Oh, and we've got someone that heard a man scream for you to stop, as well as an eyewitness who says she saw you. What Skylar didn't know is that Melody only said she saw a thin blonde man that looked like he had blood on his pants. A jury could surmise what the detective did, Nagy thought. That the black and red pants Skylar wore that night could have been misconstrued as bloody pants, especially at night. Walter continued, "And Mario's face? Besides the whooping you put on him, those scratch marks were still visible. Maybe he got them from the fight at Flick's, maybe from when you killed him."
That's not true. I didn't kill him. I left after the fight. You can't pin this on me.
But Walter had already signaled to Officer Davis outside. "The problem is, I don't believe you. Skylar Olsen, you're under arrest for the murder of Mario Alvarez Jr. As they took him outside, Skylar again fought back, screaming the whole way. The trial was long and grueling, but the prosecution built a convincing case. The witnesses, the physical evidence, it all lined up for the jury. The media followed the case closely, portraying Skylar as an unstable, violent ex-boyfriend who snapped in a fit of jealousy. When the jury returned with the verdict, Skylar's fate was sealed. Guilty. Walter felt a weight lift off his shoulders as the courtroom buzzed with the aftermath and Mario Sr. jumped up for joy. Justice had been served and Mario's family finally had closure. Skylar was led away in chains, still proclaiming his innocence, but it didn't matter anymore. The case was over. Walter's success on the case led to the promotion he had long sought, but also the opportunity to make up for the time he'd lost with his family. After the trial, Walter, Koresha, and Keisha went on a much-needed vacation to Venice, a break from the chaos of the past year. They relaxed on the beach, swam in the clear blue waters, and for a moment, everything seemed perfect. But a year later, the peace was shattered. Skylar had appealed his conviction, and this time, with a stronger legal team, the court overturned the original decision. The evidence, once believed to be airtight, was now seen as circumstantial and weak. The witnesses were unreliable, regarding Melody having a conflict of interest with Skylar. Jenny, on the other hand, although never meeting him, also had a weak testimony because it was argued that what she really heard was Rick telling Tyler to stop going down the alley. Also, Tyler had his hair dyed blonde during Pride, which is who Melody might have really seen. The nail polish and the vape were dismissed as insufficient to directly link Skylar to the murder. The rain helped prevent DNA evidence from being collected from the vape. The appellate court found Skylar not guilty, and he walked a free man. The media descended upon the case once again, but this time, Walter wasn't hailed as the hero. Headlines questioned his competence, and Skylar used the platform to accuse him of homophobia, claiming that he had been targeted because of his sexual orientation. He told him that Nagy wanted to pin this on him because he was gay and had a fight with Mario that night and didn't care about the truth. The accusation spread quickly, with talk shows, newspapers, and social media all questioning whether Walter had let bias cloud his judgment. Even The View covered it. Despite his promotion, Walter found himself shamed and criticized, his reputation tarnished by the case. Back in his office, Walter sat alone, staring at the files from the case. He had achieved everything he had worked for, a promotion, recognition, stability for his family. But the hollow victory gnawed at him. Skylar was free, the media had turned on him, and doubts about the case began to creep into his mind. Had he arrested the wrong man? Had he let pressure from the department and the media push him into making a mistake? As Skylar moved on with his life, enjoying his newfound freedom and winning a big settlement, Walter was haunted by the thought that he might never truly solve Mario's murder. And the worst part was knowing he might have chosen the wrong person to blame. The public revamped their efforts against Walter, demanding his resignation every time he was hired. One night after work, instead of going home, he went to the Coronado Bridge, which is where he ended his life. Mario Alvarez Jr.'s murder was never solved, and Crest never remarried. The accusal of Zach. Walter sat across from Zach. It had been a week since they last spoke, and this time it was different. Zach, I've been looking over everything, the evidence, your alibi, your connection to Mario, and I think it's time we address the truth. Why did you do it? I mean, I know why, but how did you know he'd be there? Zach threw his hands up.
Man, I told you before, I didn't have anything to do with Mario's death.
Walter slid a photo across the table. It showed Mario's wounds, but Zach didn't seem at all shocked by it. Look at this, Zach. The pattern of the wounds shows the killer was taller than Mario, and the majority of the blows came from the left hand. You were the tallest of all the suspects, and you have a bandage on your right hand, meaning you probably would have used your left hand to strike. Zach shifted in his seat. Oh, and we did see you in Lestats, but you were only there for 5 minutes.
Mario could have been killed in 5 minutes.
True, but you left there at 2:20 and didn't return. You were in the area of the murder, though. See, we got you within 1 block of the murder when it took place. My guess is you saw him when you were out on your little stroll, decided to confront him, and things got a little out of hand maybe. Maybe you picked up that rock and went to town. God knows you didn't need to or need it for that matter.
This is ridiculous, bro. I haven't done a damn thing.
Walter leaned in. Your best bet is to be honest. I already told the DA, and he said due to the circumstances involving Mario's corrupt nature that he'd be willing to do a deal with you if you fessed up. Zach took a deep breath and looked away.
You're wrong, brother. I didn't do it.
That's the story you're sticking with?
That's the truth.
All right, stand up and put your hands behind your back. I'm charging you. Oh, and those clothes you borrowed from your brother that night to wear? We know you borrowed his sandals. You might be wondering why that's important. It's because a 10.5 size footprint was found at the crime scene, and the same sandals you wore were 10.5. Walter signaled to Officer Davis outside. Mr. Zach Gobert, you're under arrest for the murder of Mario Alvarez Jr.
You got it wrong, man,
Zach said as he was cuffed. During the trial, the jury was shown all the evidence Walter had gathered. The height of the killer, the sandals, the bandage on Zach's right hand, the angle of the blows, and the affair he tried to keep hidden. Piece by piece, the prosecution laid out the timeline of the murder, and Zach's guilt became undeniable. The jury deliberated for a few hours before returning with the verdict. Guilty. Zach sat in stunned silence as the judge handed down his sentence. All of the evidence had sealed his fate. Mario's parents, reunited by the verdict, got remarried. After the conviction, Walter was finally promoted. His hard work had paid off, and with the raise, he and his family were able to live much more comfortably. The stress and long nights were behind them, and they celebrated by taking a dream vacation to Paris. This is where Walter would begin writing a bestseller about the case. Crest would go on to become a renowned detective like her father. Congratulations. Out of the 7 suspects, you made the right choice by choosing Zachery Gobert. I did everything I could to try to throw you off. The evidence against him, his height, his injured hand, the threats, his location, proved beyond a doubt that he was the murderer. Thanks to your detective work, justice was served. Well done. Arresting the co-worker. Nagy sat across from Omar Castilo, but this time, they were back in the interrogation room. Another thing was different. Omar was accompanied by his lawyer, Attorney Brenke, a senior at the law firm he worked at. Omar, glad you two could come in?
We're just here to clear my client's name, not to incriminate him,
Brenke said as the 3 men sat. That's fine, but look, Omar, we've been through this before and the facts don't lie. You were in Hillcrest the night Mario was murdered. You lied about seeing him. You lied about which bar you were in. You were feet away from him for minutes, and left minutes after him, shortly before he died. Omar looked at Brinka, who nodded before Omar looked back at Walter and said,
I already told you that I was out that night, and I tried to avoid Mario. Why would I kill him?
Walter slid a photo across the table showing the footprint found at the crime scene. Size 10.5. That's the size you said you were. On top of that, the argument with Mario the day before. This wasn't just a small workplace conflict. You were angry enough to follow him that night.
You have absolutely no evidence for that,
Brinka interjected. Walter continued. Admit it, Omar, you were jealous. Mario was stealing your clients, taking the spotlight. You confronted him that night and things got out of hand. We have your shoe print, your location, and a motive.
Okay, I think we're done here,
Brinka said before grabbing Omar's arm and standing the both of them up.
This is insane,
Omar said before following Brinka outside. No, it isn't, Mr. Castilo. Stop and put your hands behind your back.
Wait a minute,
Brinka yelled, turning around.
I can't believe this.
Omar yelled, continuing to walk. Nagy grabbed his arm, saying, Omar Castilo, you're under arrest for the murder of Mario Alvarez Jr. He resisted and Officer Davis had to assist until Brinka told him to calm down and just do what they say. Omar would be taken in and booked that night. Despite the arrest, when the case was presented to the district attorney, there was hesitation. The evidence was circumstantial. The footprint could have belonged to anyone, and there were no direct witnesses who saw Omar attack Mario. Ultimately, the case against him was decided to go unprosecuted, and with the help of Brinka, he was released. Months turned into years as they passed as the case file gathered dust in the precinct. Cowler had lost faith in his detective, who wasn't promoted until 8 years later. Walter's family, once supportive, now felt distant. Since the decision, he had become consumed by the case, spending sleepless nights poring over the same files, looking for something, anything he might have missed. He would continue this until the day he died, but the case was never solved, at least not until evidence revealed the true killer 65 years later, long after anyone could ever be held accountable. Revenge on the Racists. Nagy stood across from Billy. He had already attacked a black man and also admitted to attacking Mario. He was found in his truck near the alley as well. Walter had spent weeks gathering the evidence, and Billy's violent history left little doubt. Rick and Tyler also said one of the men had tattoos on his face. Wilson fit this profile twofold. Walter charged him with the murder and a hate crime. Billy Wilson was convicted in a week, leading the judge to sentence him to life in prison without parole. Walter felt a deep sense of satisfaction, and the city of San Diego praised him for his hard work. 15 years had passed since Billy's conviction. Walter, now San Diego's top detective, is thinking about retirement. Keisha had grown up and was attending college, and he and Caressia's marriage still had sparks. But everything changed one evening when the phone rang. It was Officer Davis. Now Detective Davis, and new evidence had been introduced to the case. A Ring doorbell camera had captured footage of Billy during the time Mario was killed, so he couldn't have done it. Not to mention the tattoos on his face. Testimony by Tyler was thrown out because, along with the fatal injuries, mud was found on Mario's face. It would be easy to come to the conclusion that the mud was mistaken for tattoos, especially at night from multiple yards away. No, this can't be right, he thought. But it was. Billy had been wrongly convicted. While guilty of the beating, he hadn't murdered Mario. The system had failed, and so had Walter. Billy Wilson was released from prison 10 years after the new evidence came to light, since he still had to serve time for the beating. He returned to California the same day of his release. The next evening, Keisha was driving home from a late class. What she didn't know is, Billy waited just around the block before leaving her lifeless body on the street. After the murder, he turned himself in. This was to get back at Walter, and it succeeded. When Nagy received the news of this, he withdrew from the world, spending nights sitting alone in the dark while Caressia cried. Walter couldn't escape the guilt. They ended up divorcing shortly after Walter was fired, after it was discovered that he was drinking on the job. Caressia would take Keisha, and Walter would never see either again. Walter would move to North Carolina, getting a job as a detective there. 1 year after he was hired, Walter was killed by a suspect that wasn't properly checked. The murder was never solved. Koresha went on to marry Captain Cowler. Getting even with Everett. Nagy visited Everett in his cell before saying, "Everett, you've been lying to me. I don't think Mario was dead when you got there. I think you did it."
Man, all I wanted was the watch.
Right, and you killed him for it. You think a jury's gonna believe you thought you were asleep? And you had heroin in your system? How the hell do you know what you did, man?
Oh, officer, now I done told you now the truth.
Everett was not bending. It's just too unbelievable, Walter thought before saying, "Everett Elks, you're under arrest for the murder of Mario Alvarez Jr." The trial was swift. The prosecution leaned heavily on the fact that Everett had been found with Mario's watch and that he had been seen in the alley the night of the murder. His history of violent, erratic behavior didn't help his case. He was a nuisance being represented by a public attorney. So to the jury, Everett looked guilty, another drugged-out homeless man in San Diego. Despite his pleas of innocence, the jury found him guilty of Mario's murder. The judge sentenced Everett to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The community, still mourning Mario's death, was satisfied. But as the years passed, Everett continued to proclaim his innocence. From his prison cell, he told anyone who would listen that he hadn't killed Mario, but no one believed him. The case had been closed, the community had moved on, and Walter Nagy's career had thrived after the conviction. The murder of Mario Alvarez Jr. was no longer in the headlines, and Everett's pleas were drowned out by time and the overwhelming belief that justice had been served. For 33 long years, Everett lived out his sentence, growing even older and more frail. Maintaining his innocence, he died alone in his cell. No one would ever know the truth, that Everett was innocent. The real killer, whoever they were, had escaped justice. In the end, Walter and the community remained satisfied, never knowing the truth that had been lost forever with Everett's death.